Hi, Mark.
Okay. Hello, hello. Greetings from Boston.
I guess we should start with our mutual friend, Ted Williams, who you're good friends with and I'm good friends with, but we've never met.
I know it's ironic. I was actually just in Pittsburgh 2 weeks ago. I go every year, and I have now for about 25 years. Ever since Ted's wedding, I went, and I've been going ever since. And before that was for the band. So it's nice to finally meet, albeit even here on Zoom, if that's it.
Yeah, I was living there for like 5 years, but I'm living in the Worcester area now, so I'm not too far from you.
Oh, I had no idea. I thought you were in Pittsburgh.
I was for up until around right before the pandemic. Then I came back here
Oh,
just in time for all the fun.
yes, yes, exactly.
So you've just been going out there visiting since before when you played out there. You go there on business or just to visit?
No, just to visit. It's ironic. I mean, we went there when I was, back in the '80s with the band Executioner. Of course, we played a number of times, including with Dream Death, Ted's band,
Yeah.
and Ted and I became friends, and we kept in touch throughout, the '80s into the '90s. But then, Executioner stopped around that time, and we kind of lost touch to some degree. We kept in touch, but not nearly as closely until the very late '90s when Ted was getting married and invited me to the wedding. And at that point, I hadn't been to Pittsburgh for probably 7 or 8 years or so. But I went out, for the wedding, of course, and it was just great. I reconnected with a whole group of people from back in that era, Ted and Todd. I'm not sure whom you know out there, but, Todd from the Cheats and Brian and yeah, Brian Gates and Rob from they were in Pilsner, which actually contributed a
Yeah.
song to an album. They contributed a song to a movie I produced after years later. But anyhow, I reconnected with a bunch of people, and it was such a great time. I just started going every year.
Yeah, you probably didn't. Well, maybe you know this, but I don't think you did by what you just said. But I actually met Ted through Robbie when I signed Eviction to Metal Blade, which was in eight, 89. But Ted and I didn't become friends until later, until after that. And it was in the mid 90s that we became closer friends. And as time went on, we became closer and closer. And then when I was out there for 5 years, but Robbie is who I knew for a long time, Robbie Tabachka. And of course, I know Todd too, I know all those guys. But
Yeah, Todd Porter. There was back, rest in peace, Paul Butcherelli, who was part of all that, and yeah, Greg from Get Hip. I mean,
oh
that
yeah,
whole
yeah. I
that
actually
group.
worked there for a little while at Get Hip in
Oh, is that right?
Pittsburgh.
Oh, no
That's
kidding.
why
A
I
small
moved out
world.
there actually. So you're originally from New England. Where are you from?
Yeah, New England originally. Yeah,
Where did you grow
Boston,
up?
Boston,
Right
right
in
outside of Boston.
what town?
I grew up primarily in
Oh,
Needham,
Needham.
Massachusetts.
Yeah.
It's just west. I mean, you may know where it is.
Oh,
Yeah,
I know
next to
Needham. I
Newton.
used to joke and call that the whitest town in America. It was just a
Well,
joke
yeah,
that
and
we
then we moved to, yeah, exactly. It is pretty much, if not, it's got to be the runner-up at least. So.
But so you went to what, Needham High School or something like that?
No, I went to a private high school. My parents both were teachers, so they were very keen on my high school, and they ended up sending me to a private high school.
Really? Where was that? Was that also in Mass or a different
Yeah, yeah,
state?
and it was in Weston, Massachusetts, a school called
Oh, oh yeah, Weston's
Rivers
nice. I
School.
know Weston. You drive through there on the Mass Pike whenever you
You
go
do.
into town.
I think
Uh,
it's even wider. I think it's even wider than Needham, if that's possible.
yeah, the suburbs in that area. That's a good way to describe them.
They are.
Um, did you start listening to music when you were at a young age? Like, what were you listening to when you were like pre-teen and then teen?
Well, okay. I guess the first music I ever bought was Rock and Roll Hoochie Coo, a 45 by Rick
Rick
Derringer,
Derringer.
the little 45 back then.
Yeah.
And yeah, that sort of led the way. Whatever was popular at the time. The first album I ever bought was Aerosmith Rocks. And then I proceeded to buy all the Aerosmith records after that. So I guess those were kind of the formative years, I guess, looking back on it
So like
now. But
guitar hard rock bands were your thing?
Yeah, what really changed it for me, what was a truly a life-changing event, and it's one of those things I didn't even think about until, decades later. But in 1981, my dad took me to see AC/DC at the beginning of the Back in Black tour. They were still doing theaters at that point. They later came back and were doing arenas, but I that show was life-changing. I had never seen a show so intense, so powerful. And when I walked out of that show, I said, I'm buying a guitar and I'm learning how to play and I'm making a band.
Wow. So the beginning of the Brian Johnson era, pretty much.
Yeah, it was exactly the beginning of it.
Yeah.
And Angus Young just put on a performance like nothing I'd ever seen. I'd been to a few concerts before with my dad. He was good. He took me when I was really pretty young, but Angus Young, I mean, the whole band was, of course, in that album. Everything was, it was a, transformative album. But Young's performance was just so mesmerizing for I was about 14 years old, I guess, at the time. I just said, I that's it. I'm getting a guitar and I'm forming a band. That's what's going
Did
to
you
happen.
did you go right for the electric or did you start
Oh
with the
yeah, right for the
acoustic?
electric. No, I didn't play around. No, it's right for the electric. I always liked kind of hard rock. I was at an AC/DC
Yeah.
show. So, I mean, I did play a little on an acoustic guitar just in and around there, but no, electric was the goal from day zero.
Did you take lessons?
I did, yeah.
So when you went to take lessons, did you say I want to learn like hard rock and metal, or did you like have to go through all the phases of, you know,
It was a tug of war. I wanted to learn all hard rock and heavy metal, and the teachers were often less enthusiastic. They would sort of teach, Jim Croce and the Eagles and this guy, which I didn't hate or anything. I mean, some of the music I still like to this day, but I had to sort of fight to be taught, Back in Black and Led
Mhm.
Zeppelin and this kind of stuff. So, but yeah.
Did you immediately try to start getting bands going at that age, or I mean, how long did that take?
It took about a year and a half. I mean, I couldn't really play anything for a year and a half, and so there was sort of failed attempts to create a band for probably 2.5 years. I was not a virtuoso by any stretch. I never became one, but at first I just wasn't very good. I mean, it was all cover songs for a few years there, but it wasn't until probably after I was probably 18, 19 when I got done with high school, 45 years later. By that time, I was, fairly proficient, and that's when soon then Executioner was came to pass.
So your private high school, sometimes those schools are very eclectic with the people. There weren't other musicians or other people at your school that were playing at that time?
Uh, Actually, yeah, the bass player and also the vocalist for Executioner was a classmate of mine. It was odd. He was a classmate when we were freshmen.
Ari?
Ari Vainio, that's
Right.
correct. Yeah. He was a classmate when we were freshmen, but then he went to a different school after that one year, but I knew him.
Hmm.
And we kept in loose touch because I knew he was a musician. And then later on, when I was a senior, I wanted to form a cover band of a little more, try to be a little more serious. And I knew he was good. And so we formed a cover band. And then right after high school, we decided we wanted to play, more heavy metal music and to do original music. And Ari he was frankly a much better songwriter than I ever was. And so we sort of joined forces. And yeah, that's sort of how Executioner. Well, no, that's not true, actually. We had this cover band, but we didn't have a name. And we got Dan Scannell joined in on drums, and we finalized the idea to become an original heavy metal band. And Dan Scannell contributed not just great drums, but also more importantly, in some ways, the name. That
Oh,
the name
so
stuck forever.
yeah, but you guys were actually called Last Generation before you were Executioner, right?
Wow. Yes, that is true. I gotta ask, how did you did some
I do my
homework?
research, dude.
You
I do
did
my
some deep
research.
research.
Yeah,
Yeah, that
I
was
did. I didn't know that until I researched it because I know Executioner, but I didn't know that you had a different name. I found that in an old interview that you must have did somewhere online. So it was around 84 that Executioner was actually you became Executioner, right?
That's exactly right. We graduated high school in '84, and it was that summer that no, actually that fall that Executioner Dan joined the band. We decided to go into heavy metal originals, and the name changed from Last Generation to Executioner.
What were you listening to at that time? Because it was a lot it's a lot heavier than what you were listening to.
Yeah, at that time, boy, that's a tricky one. I think we were listening to maybe very early, like Man of War, some of
Oh
the
yeah.
early independent. I mean, we were listening to, yeah, I remember now, like Exciter,
Oh yeah.
Man of War, Accept, some of these sort of early second generation bands. I mean, we listened to AC/DC too, and
What about
those.
Metallica and Slayer and Megadeth and all those bands? Was it
I would
before
say
that?
that really hit us about 1985. It
Hmm.
was probably about 6 months later when, yeah, Metallica and Slayer and Anthrax really became very big influences on Executioner.
So you had that vision right then and there that you wanted to go for the real heavier sound.
Yes, yeah, I was really drawn to it, and as were Ari and Dan, and yeah, we just moved in that direction. It was exciting. The music was, all of it back then was so exciting. It was so new. No one had ever heard anything like it. Well, at least to my knowledge, no one had ever heard anything like Kill 'Em All before, or
Right.
Show No Mercy, or Fistful of Metal. I mean, it just kind of blew the lid off of conventional heavy metal. I mean, we all love Black Sabbath, of course, but it was just such an exciting moment that I think we all were just kind of pulled into this. Almost like this vortex of new music and new sound and taking heavy metals into sort of a different place.
Yeah, 84 was like when Metal Blade and Megaforce and all these
Mm.
labels, all the bands that you mentioned, and then there was like even Celtic Frost and other bands like that. But that was a really exciting time. Were you guys going to record stores? I mean, how were you finding your music at that time?
Yeah, I mean, there was really record stores was it. There were record stores. Newbury Comics was the store in
Newberry.
Boston, as you probably are
Yeah.
aware now, and that was kind of it. That was like sort of the nucleus for anything underground. I mean, there were big chains back then, of course, Strawberries, Good Vibrations, these huge shit, but they didn't really carry a lot. You had to really look for independent heavy metal or any independent music. But yeah, Newbury Comics was really focused on a lot of that, and so that was really a mecca. I mean, truly Tower Records later on, but.
Yes, yes. So when you get started, do you remember your first gigs that you were playing and where you played in around after 84?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, we played little town venues, kind of. We would team up with other local bands, and we'd sort of sell tickets to try to get people to come. And like these little local theaters would hold maybe like 150 people, that kind of thing. And yeah, it just started to sort of develop a sound and a set list, and the whole creative part of it began to take shape a little bit. We were writing, newer songs then, newer style, and so we played these small shows primarily, and right around, one was in Needham, one was in Lynn, one was in Newton, these places around us before we really tried to take it sort of more into the city.
Boston was never really known for a big metal scene, but I imagine you probably were around Wargasm, Malaya Rage, bands like that. Was that the scene for you?
Yes and no. They came sort of right after us. We were, I mean, within a year. I'm not exactly sure. I remember, I certainly remember Wargasm. They were very good. I saw them several times, and I feel like, oh, well, it's confusing because their album was so delayed coming out that
Yeah.
it's hard for me to place now when I first
Yeah,
heard them.
86, 88, I think was more, when they got their first record out. So you guys were like one of the first bands doing what you were doing locally, weren't you?
Yeah, to my knowledge, the first. I don't know of any other. The as you say, Boston was not a heavy metal, is not even a very heavy metal friendly city. It was all sort of more avant-garde, this kind of thing. They never really embraced heavy metal or thrash metal or any of that. And
Did you guys get buddy up with those hardcore bands that started flipping like SSD and DYS and Jerry? You know how those bands all became more metally? Was that part of your scene?
100%. That was the scene that we really gravitated toward. To this day, I'm close friends with Nancy Burrill, particularly the bass player for SSD's husband, and Al Burrill. And yeah, I mean, we live right down the street from each other and remained, good friends. And yeah, that was definitely particularly what I gravitated toward. I produced a lot of concerts back in that era, back around 85, 86. And it was interesting looking back, the hardcore bands were very willing to kind of do these DIY shows. I would find a hall somewhere and we just get together and advertise it. And, people did come and we drew, good crowds. Yeah. So it became we were sort of an odd, now that I think about it, there was sort of them, and then we were just kind of there. We were like kind of a token heavy metal band. Like, why? How did these guys get here? But yeah, it was like SSD. I mean, they were huge, of course. So we played with them. We played with Gangrene a couple times. The FUs, who became the Straw Dogs later on.
That was the other one I was going to mention. Yeah.
Yeah, COC, Corrosion of Conformity, the Offenders. Scream. In fact, I'm not sure if Dave Grohl was in the band at that point. I don't think so. But we played with a lot of hardcore bands because they were just very amenable to just playing. I mean, the heavy metal stuff was all sort of put through clubs, which was good as well. But that involved a lot more bureaucracy and booking agents and all this kind of, it got more political, I guess you could say. And so, yeah, we were close with those, all those bands you mentioned, that whole hardcore scene. And it was also, that scene was much bigger. We played with Jerry's Kids. No, we never did play with Jerry's Kids. We played with the Freeze. But that scene already
existed.
That's
an interesting show.
Wasn't it? Our drum riser collapsed at that show, which made it even more interesting.
No, did you guys end up playing the Channel and the Rat and places like that too?
Yeah, no, those were the metal shows. We played the Channel with Man O' War. Yeah. And we actually played the Rat with Megadeth.
Really?
On their, yeah, it was on the Killing is what am I trying to say? The first album there, I can't think of the name.
With Chris Poland was in the band. The first two records,
It's amazing. I can't remember the name of the album now. It's so long, but
yes, Killing is My Business. I know those records too, and I'm drawing.
Oh yeah, Killing is My Business. And Business is good. There we go. In fact, Dan gave Chris Poland a ride to.
Peace Sells was the other one. Peace Sells.
The second one, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, Dan gave Chris a ride to the music store to get drumsticks before the show. So yeah, that was Megadeth.
Nice. Yeah, I ended up working with Chris when he was in Damn the Machine, but that was much later. That was in the mid 90s at Metal Blade. It's really interesting to me. I was going to talk to you about the Barills and Jamie Sharappa because I know you're a school teacher and Nancy. And were you guys at the same high school, you and Nancy?
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, yeah. For years and years. Jamie's there now. Still, Nancy got me the job. She was instrumental in getting me the interview, which led to the job. And yeah, we all remain close.
That's fantastic. Nancy's been on the show, and so has SSD's been on twice. But we'll talk about that in the school teaching thing in a few minutes. I'm still really interested in because you guys are one of the pioneers of the Boston metal scene. Now, how did I worked at Enigma. Are you
Sorry.
there?
Yeah, I'm here. Hang on. It's I don't move around enough in the room. Well, hang on.
I can hear you, but I don't see you.
Yeah, the light went off. Hang on 1 second.
I'm going to talk to you about, the new Renaissance and Green World. Because, I worked at Enigma Records, and when I was there, Green World was the distribution company. But then when the two companies split up, Green World started their own label. And I remember this. You guys won the Speed Metal Hell compilation with Savage Grace and Whiplash. And who are you dealing with? Pete and Dean? Were those the guys over there at Green World that you're dealing with? Or were you going through New Renaissance?
New Renaissance. spoke with the people at Green World maybe once, but Anne Boleyn was really in charge. It was her label, and she was, handling all of that. So we spoke to her quite a bit and actually met her when we were in California
Wow,
on
that's
tour.
cool.
Yeah, oh, it was great. Yeah, she was fantastic. She gave us our break to get us started, and yeah, no, it started with that speed metal hell. Victims of Evil was the song that was on there,
Yes.
and
And I
she
knew,
offered us an album deal, which I think was the first one on New Renaissance Records. I'm not positive, but yeah, which she really was key in getting us going, and yeah, that was so we worked with her quite a bit, and it was Green World. I think after that album, it was the second album. I don't think was through Green World. I think they separated, but I'm not sure.
they didn't, that company went down soon, pretty soon after that. But as far as that compilation goes, that must have really impacted your visibility because during that time, the underground metal scene was really booming, man. I mean,
It was huge. Yeah, no, that was like I said, that new music was just exploding, and the market for it was just, I felt like it was hungry. People wanted more of that, the new kind of heavy metal, whatever you want to call it, thrash metal, speed metal, whatever you like to say. And yeah, so that's true. When that album came out, the compilation, we started getting mail from all over the world. I mean, it was it was crazy. I was living at my parents' house, and all this mail would be coming. Parents would be like, "What the heck?" People writing from Germany and all these places. But it was new. The music was new. I mean, of course, Metallica, Slayer, Anthrax were the forerunners of it all. But right behind that, a lot of young audience, they wanted even more. They were looking for, as you say, Whiplash was, they were great. They had some good songs. And Exciter,
Carnivore, yeah,
Carnivore was in there. And we were kind of in there like,
Steeler. That was
Steeler,
an
right? Yeah.
exciting period. Lizzie Borden, Fate's Warning. They were like, progressive, heavy, thrash, and you guys were like part of that whole scene. Did you get to tour much?
Yeah, yeah, we toured a fair amount. We did a number of New England tours, particularly in Pittsburgh. We played there, I don't know, 3 or 4 times. We played there with Dr. No, we played there with Ted Dream Death. We played there, I think we headlined there one time. Yeah, we did a bunch of shows. And then we played, oh yeah, we played in Connecticut, we played in Canada, we played in Burlington, Vermont. We played all in New Jersey. We played at City Gardens a couple of times. We played with TSOL. We played with a lot of hardcore bands, looking
Nice.
back on it now.
Yeah,
Again,
you
that was
could
just an
do
easy
that. Yeah.
thing to link up. We toured with the FUs, actually. We played a bunch of shows with them. Poughkeepsie, I remember. But then we did two national tours, one as far as Texas and one all the way to California and back. And yeah, those were,
Was it you
pretty
guys in a van or was it with
sure.
another band?
Oh, we were in a van. That was it.
That's fantastic. What was that, like 85, 86?
86, 87. Yes. Yeah.
Nice, nice. Um, Looking back, in the name of metal, that was the first record, right?
Correct. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, it seems like that album had like a polarizing reception. What do you think led to the strong reactions from your fans and critics? Was it just both positive and negative? Was it that whole scene at that time? And because the name, you guys had a fantastic name, and that must have played into it as well.
Yeah. Again, I think, yeah, it was the scene was exploding. The appetite for this kind of music was just growing almost by the hour. I mean, it was a situation I think where there were, a lot of young people who they had listened to I'm sorry, back then it would have been Ride the Lightning. They had listened to Hell Awaits. They listened to them 100 times, and they're some of the best albums probably ever rendered. But they just wanted more. There was just this incredible thirst for this kind of music, and we were kind of in there swinging along with a whole bunch of other bands that we talked about. And I think yeah, the album, the name of the band, the title of the album, I mean, it was very, I guess in terms of a marketing thing, you knew what music you were getting, at least according to the name of the band and the album. And I think people gravitated toward it. There was a market, and we were there at that time.
You don't have any copies of In the Name of Metal on vinyl, do you?
Very
That's
few.
that's
Yeah.
hard to find, man. That's a hard
Yeah.
record to find.
I've been
Um,
told. Yeah. I think they pop up on eBay every once in a while.
Ari was an integral part of the band's early sign. Can you talk about the dynamics of the band when he was still around and how his departure affected the band?
Sure. Ari and I were, again, as we talked about, originally in a cover band. It was just more of a somewhat mainstream cover band. When Dan joined up, we became Executioner and became an original heavy metal band. Ari is, he's a much better songwriter than I am. Ari drew from, how can I say this? I tended to just sort of draw on whatever I was listening to at the time. In the Name of Metal, that song I wrote, and it was right around the time I was listening to a lot of Gloves of Metal from Man of War.
Right. Yeah.
And you can sort of see, like, when I look back now, I mean, I like the song In the Name of Metal. I'm glad I wrote it and recorded it, but it was very much, I would say, largely derivative of, like I said, what I was listening to at that moment. And Ari wasn't like that. Ari was truly original. He came up with stuff that was just, his own. And a lot of it worked. It was tricky in that he was less of a heavy metal person than I was. He liked a lot of different music. I mean, really liked a lot of different music. And I think in the end, it gave the In the Name of Metal album a much higher degree of originality than the Break the Silence album. Now, some people didn't like the In the Name of Metal album. They thought some of it was too punky. They thought some of it was a little too poppy or whatever. That's, everybody's got an opinion. But looking back on it now, it was a much more original record. I mean, Break the Silence, particularly the songs that I wrote, which were most of them. I mean, I'm proud of them and I'm glad that they're there. But again, they did not have the originality. Well, with one exception, Terminally Ill. That was, I'd say, original. But Ari, yeah, he was definitely a more creative influence on the band. And so that, I think, explains some of the difference between those two records.
Okay, this is one of the more interesting parts of this interview. Seth Putnam. I mean, Seth from AC
Of
was
course.
an executioner. I mean, talk about that because he was one, now rest in peace, he's no longer with us, but he was a very interesting guy. I met him a couple times, but it was later on when AC, and I have trouble saying the name. I just say AC. But
Oh, yeah, no, that's for sure.
can you talk about Seth? How did you end up playing with Seth and how did you guys meet?
Well, we met at a club, a heavy metal club. Well, a club that had a heavy metal night in Boston. I want to say, although I'm not sure this is right, but I think it was at a Tank concert. They're playing at a club called
Tank.
Celebrations. I know
Yeah.
it was at a club called Celebrations in
Kenmore
Kenmore Square.
Square. Yeah, yeah. I
And
remember
they
that
had
place.
Tuesday night heavy metal nights, and
Yeah.
Seth would go, and I would go, and we all went. And I feel like it might have been at a Tank show, but it might have just been at a local show. But in any case, we met, and he was very nice, friendly, and we became friends. We were just friends. He was friends of mine, and friends of Dan's, and friends of the band. And then, as time went on, he actually went with us on our first tour that went as far as Texas. So it was Seth, Ari, Dan, and myself in a van. And we toured together, got as far as Texas, and that tour had a lot of trouble. There was mistakes made by me in large part. I didn't use a booking agent, which in hindsight was a huge mistake. And it was a real struggle. It was tough. And finally, it just we sort of imploded is what happened. We were not getting along at all.
It happens in a van. It happens.
Yeah, it was the summer. It was, 100 degrees out. We were in, I don't know where we finally ended up in Texas. Yeah, it was Texas, actually. And we had a huge falling out, unfortunately. And that was things did kind of implode after that. Well, when it came time to do the next, what turned into a national tour, the Break the Silence tour, he'd been friendly with the band throughout, and he played bass, and so he became the bass player.
So was
But
he
he started
just,
off as a roadie.
yeah, I was going to ask you. So he was your roadie. Wow, that's really
Yes.
cool. That's
Mhm.
cool. Yeah, the production on Silence is much different compared to the debut album. What was your approach to the recording process, and how do you think it differed so much from the first, from the recording aspect? You already mentioned the songwriting. How about the recording part of it?
We learned a lot, maybe not as much as we should have, but the first, In the Name of Metal, nobody to this day was happy with how that was recorded. We did not know what we were doing. We were young. We got that deal quickly. Boston, particularly back then, there were not a lot of well-known recording studios for heavy metal. I mean, there weren't a lot of recording studios at all, and there still aren't a lot now, but we ended up stupidly using a recording studio that was mainly built for commercial jingles, and not even jingles. It was built for commercial, what they call like voiceover
Oh,
work.
wow.
It wasn't built for a band, and
Especially a
but
heavy band, right?
especially a heavy band, right? Exactly. If anything, maybe a jazz band would have had better luck. But it was a beautiful studio because they were dealing with all these big clients and corporate clients. And we were sort of like, wow, what a beautiful studio. We didn't know anything. And so, well, this will sound great. And some of it I think sounds decent, but no one was happy with the sound of the In the Name of Metal album in general. I mean, it's not what we were after. It just wasn't what we were looking for. And the second time around, actually, Seth was really good with that stuff. He was much better at production than I was, or I think than Dan was. And we found a studio that was far out of the city. It was out in Hanson, Massachusetts, and it was built for bands.
Blue Jay?
Pardon?
Was it Blue Jay? What studio was it?
No, Blue Jay was huge. It was Cortland
I don't
Recording.
know that place.
Yeah, it was out in Hanson, Mass. And by that time, we had done a bunch of shows, and we had different companies we worked for the live shows. And one of the guys said, "Hey, when you record again, you really should check this place out because that last studio." And we said, "We know, it wasn't the right setup." So the Break the Silence became a much more stripped down, just heavy metal, speed metal production. And Seth had a lot to do with that. He helped get the guitar sounds, the drum sounds. It was In the Name of Metal production, some of it was kind of a hot mess. I mean, it was just, the mixing was very difficult. We hadn't, like I said, we just weren't that experienced. And not that we were that much more experienced a year later, but Seth was helpful, and he had a good ear for all that kind of thing. And he was, between Seth and the studio, and we also had a producer helping us by then too, friend to this day, Michael Mesnikoff, and it was it made a difference. It really honed down the sound. We got what we were looking for.
Do you feel like that record's as popular as the name In the Name of Metal? Because it seems like In the Name of Metal, everyone is the record everyone looks for.
Yeah, I totally agree. I don't think it was as popular for a couple of different reasons. Again, stupid mistake on my part. Anne Boleyn was right. We were not happy with the production on In the Name of Metal. So much so that when she said we'll do another album, I said, well, we want to re-record, I think it was 4 songs from In the Name of Metal, and put them on Break the Silence. And she said, no, that's not a good idea. She said, don't do that. The fans aren't going to like it. Da, da, da. I was stupid, and I did it anyway. We did it anyway. And I think that hurt sales, and it hurt, attention. People looking back now, I mean, it was just a dumb thing to do.
I remember that. You're not the only band guilty of that. A lot of bands do that. They think they can make their songs better. And you don't know, especially back then in the 80s, people didn't really know yet. It was a great time, but you didn't know. You thought, oh, not enough people have heard these songs. Let's do them again. I went through that with the Neighborhoods. They re-recorded Prettiest Girl, and I didn't think it was a good idea, but it's hard to argue with you guys, the musicians, about what you want to do. So I would have probably taken Anne's side in that argument. But
no, I would have. In hindsight, I would have taken her side on a heartbeat. But yeah, ego. It's like we want the song to be heard the right way. And looking back now, nobody cares. They'd already heard the song. They just want to hear a new song, especially if they're paying money for the record. I mean, it was a bad move on our part. Also, a couple other things happened that I think hurt that record. We were no longer with Green World. That is to say, New Renaissance was with, oh, who was distributing Combat back then? Big
Important?
Important. Thank you.
Yeah.
They were with Important. And again, stupid mistake on my part. Important through Anne Boleyn got in touch with me not long before the album was going to come out, and they said that they had another band, I think must have been on Combat, called Heathen, and that Heathen had an album coming out right around the same time called Breaking the Silence.
Oh
Uh,
boy.
I
Yeah.
said, so what? And they said, well, we really don't think we think you should change the title, which in hindsight, they were right. We were young. I'm not changing the title. They can change the title. You get into this stupid ego thing. And this is pure speculation, but I don't know that Important pushed Break the Silence as hard as they might have had it been named something else. I have no idea. Maybe they did. I don't know. But I certainly don't think it helped.
Well,
If
I
we had
could tell
changed
you.
the title, I think they might have been happier.
Okay, I do know a little bit about that topic there because I was working at Roadrun at that point, and we had an agreement with Heathen for that record, and Combat stole them from us. Literally the night before, their lawyer called me the next day and said, "We're sorry, but we're not signing your contract. We're going with Combat." And I think the reason they probably pushed that record harder is because I believe it was like a $40,000 advance. It was a lot
Wow.
of money. So, but that record didn't blow up either, man. So it
No,
backfired
no.
for both bands, you know.
Yeah, yeah, no, it did not.
Everyone thought they knew everything back then. It's like,
Well, yeah, I mean, hey, listen, when you're 20 years old, you know everything.
yeah, right, right. And in independent labels were doing really well and selling a lot, but you would have to sell a lot of records back then to really get, you'd have to sell like 20, 30,000 records, and that wasn't easy to do. And I don't think Heathen sold that many records either. So
I doubt it. Yeah,
yeah.
but
But by the time you got around to In Cold Blood, where were you at that point?
so In Cold Blood was recorded soon after Break the Silence. We did have a pretty good buzz coming off the Break the Silence tour. That was probably the closest we ever got to making the next step up
Mhm.
into a major label. I remember we had an inquiry from Polygram Records. It might have even been their London division or something, but they reached out to me and it never went anywhere. And I don't remember exactly why, but that was kind of at the peak of our popularity, I suppose. That tour was successful. The tour we did was, oh, I don't even know if I mentioned this. So yeah, right, I did. The second tour we did was just the three of us on tour, Dan, myself, and Seth for the Break the Silence album. And that tour went well. I used a booking agent, thank God, Johnny Swift, I want to say his name, was a guy out of New York. And he was great. And he knew how to book a tour, which,
Yeah.
helps. And he had us on a lot of good shows. We played with At War a few times. We played with DRI. That was a great show out in Salt Lake City. We played, and then, yeah, when we got to LA, wow, we played with, it was Creator, hence the shirt. It was, yeah, Creator with Nuclear Assault and St. Vitus.
Oh,
And
love them. Love
yeah,
that band.
it was a great show. So we had, we were in Circus Magazine. I remember it was like the biggest thing ever.
Hey, you guys
And
had a really good buzz going. I remember that whole period. I didn't get to see Executioner, but I remember I was like, these guys are doing well. And all the bands you're mentioning, it was a great, great scene. Did you go to the heavy metal shop when you were in Salt Lake City?
I believe we did, as a matter of
Yeah,
fact. We weren't
Kevin's a
there very
friend of
long,
mine.
but I think there was one in Salt Lake City and there was a place in San Francisco that was like a must go to. They had these record store that was like, they had our record there and everything else. And so, yeah, we did. And it was great. That was a great, yeah, that whole tour that was a great experience. Thank you, Gary Tovar, for putting us on
Gary
that bill.
Tovar. So you must have really appreciated when you went to towns that really were more metal than Boston when you went on the road.
Absolutely. Yeah. Boston. I mean, we had our following in Boston by that time. So, we certainly felt very appreciated in Boston, but it was amazing to go to, well, like Pittsburgh and, we don't know anybody at all. And there's like a no, good number of people that are like really into the album and the band and the songs. And, yeah, I mean, that's kind of the dream, really. I mean, people coming up to you that, hey, we love your song, and you're not even in your home state, never mind anything else. And so, yeah, no, I mean, those things are sort of priceless, basically.
What happened, man? How did it all come to an end?
Well, so we recorded, what became The Storm After the Calm, and during the recording of that, Seth left. Seth had formed his own, well, at the first was a side project at that time, was called Satan's Warriors. And it was sort of, I guess you could say, big step toward what ultimately became AC. And they were successful. They had a great, I mean, they had a good sound, and the name was great. And, people were coming out, in part, of course, for the music, but also the curiosity factor. Seth was starting to sort of, develop a persona of being very entertaining, very sort of over the top. And it was great. I mean, he was a true entertainer from day zero, and people really responded, and he wanted to do his own thing. That was really what it came down to.
So you didn't want to
And
replace him?
well, we tried and we did. We had a bass player, Tommy Flynn, and he was great. He was in there for about a year. We did some shows with him. We played Canada again with him and some shows around Massachusetts. And yeah, he was fantastic. But I think I mean, it was such a long time ago now. We couldn't get signed to a major label. We were really trying to get signed. The contract with New Renaissance had expired, and we really were trying hard to get the attention of, whatever, Columbia or a Polygram or somebody. And we just weren't having any luck. And we thought maybe we would put the album out on our own label. We actually had a name at the time. We were going to call it Empire Music, or maybe Empire Records back then, and for the movies. And yeah, that, of course, as you would know a lot better than I, putting out your own album was a whole lot harder than we knew. We had to get a distributor, and that was very difficult. And finally, I think, as it was a case of where the window had closed.
Hmm.
2 years went by, and I myself, I think I just sort of said, hey, you know what? This is, I think it's run its course. I think we've gone as far as we were going to go. And looking back now, I think I was that time, that one thing, I think I was right. I think Executioner was a solid band for what we were doing. I'm proud of what we put out there, and I'm glad we did all of it. It was an adventure that, it was priceless. There's nothing I could
You had
ever.
a good run, man. You had a good
We did.
run.
It was just beautiful when I look back on it now. All the friends, the shows. I mean, just again, priceless. But we were not ever going to be Slayer, Metallica, or Anthrax. I didn't even know that then, but now, I mean, those guys are brilliant. And the music industry, there's not much second place. You're either brilliant or you're, carrying your own gear out at 2 a.m. for 100 people. And that's cool when you're 19. I mean, I loved carrying my gear out at 2 a.m. for 100 people, but I don't think I could do it today. I'd be in a back brace or something.
I really appreciate your honesty about this. I really
Yeah.
do. So at that point, did you decide that you were going to be a school teacher? Because that's what I know you made films, and we'll talk about that in
Yeah.
a second, but you've been a school teacher for a long time, right?
Yeah, a long time. Yeah.
20,
Almost 30
30,
years.
30
Almost 30 years.
years.
Yeah. Going
Wow.
on. Yeah.
And you mentioned earlier Nancy Burrell helped you get your first job. That was Revere High School?
That's correct. Yep.
And are you still with Revere High School?
No, I just switched to Malden High School just a couple months ago, actually.
Wow. Wow, those are some
Mhm.
pretty powerful towns. Revere and Malta.
Yeah. Yeah.
People
Don't play
around
around up
here,
here.
I mean, I have a worldwide audience, but people out there in the world, I'll tell you that there's a lot of personality in certain towns in the Boston area. And when you think of Malden, you think of hockey players and Gary
Oh, yeah.
Sharon and Boys Life and
Right.
the hardcore Mark McKay and all those guys. They all come from. Did you guys ever play with Slapshot, by the way? I should ask you that.
No, we never did. I don't know why not. I was never uh,
They didn't
super
really
friendly with.
yeah, they didn't really cross over the way some of those other bands did. They were really hardcore. They
They
didn't like,
were
yeah,
more punk hardcore.
yeah.
Yeah, they were just a slightly different. Like you said, they never. I don't remember them as ever going into the metal thing, really.
And was Jamie a teacher with you also, Jamie Sharappa?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. That's exactly right. Yep.
So is he still at Revere High School now? Because he
He is.
still teaches.
Oh, yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah. He's got the Long Wait now. I don't know if you've heard of the Long Wait, their new band. It's
Yeah.
Jamie.
Oh, sure.
Yeah,
Yeah, I know
Mark
he's had
McKay.
the band now for a little bit. Yeah.
Yeah, I've seen them a few times. They're really good. Daryl Shepard on guitar. You probably remember Roadsaw and bands like that.
I
They were
remember the
more,
name for sure.
yeah, they were more of a stoner rock band. I think they came out in the 90s after Executioner. So how do you like working in high schools? Is it a good place to be?
Oh, I love it. Yeah, no, it's the best job.
What do you
Yeah, no, it's
teach?
great. I teach English.
Nice. Like, do
Mhm.
your kids know that you were a rock guy?
They figure it out. Yeah, it's funny. It happens almost annually. I don't know exactly why. I think, word gets around a little bit. And, nowadays, of course, with the internet, everything is so readily available. We'll be sitting in class and, week number two. And I've had a lot of students now, including this year, where I taught their parents.
Wow.
And
I'm,
so they'll
I'm
say, like,
guess.
I think my dad said you were in a band or some heavy metal band you were in, like way back when. I'm like, oh, one of the parents saw me play when we opened for Megadeth. He came down to a parent teacher night and was like, by the way, I'm here for my son, of course, but also I was there when you played with Megadeth, and I just want to say that was great. I was like, oh wow, that's awesome. Thank you.
I'm sure you don't wear your creator shirt that you have on to high school.
No, no. In fact, I flipped into this right before. I'm in my classroom right now. I literally
I
came
kind
right
of
out of the
figured
meeting.
that out. I kind of figured that out, man. When the lights went off before, I'm like, he's got to be in
Yeah, I
his
hope
high
it doesn't
school.
go off again here. It's the no
Um,
motion.
do kids ever come up to you? Like, you must notice if they're music guys. Do they ever come up to you and ask you for advice or anything? Does that ever happen?
Not very often. It's that to me is a little bit sad in that not nearly, I don't think, in my experience, not nearly as many young people I see are picking up instruments as they did
That is
30,
sad.
40 years ago. I mean, they like music and they listen to all kinds of music, but no, I don't know of anyone that's in a band or anything like that at all.
Wow.
Whereas back when I was in high school, we remember like there were all kinds of bands just in one high school there. Now there may be ones I don't know about. That's entirely possible, but I had a former student who's now a friend of mine, a good friend of mine, great guy, Rob Marchetti, who he's an incredible guitar player. I mean, I remember when he bought a guitar, he was 14 years old. He was in my English class, and within a year, he was better than I was. I mean, it was incredible. And he's tried to put bands together for as long as I can remember. And it's just, I don't think there's nearly as many young people, at least not right around here. I have no idea elsewhere, but there's just not as much of that going on. And it's kind of a shame.
Are you listening to a lot of music these days?
I listen to quite a bit. I listen to everything. I mean, I'm all over the place, literally. I mean,
Like, what do you like these days? Anything you can mention?
I mean, for like new stuff, I actually, as of late, for the first time in my life, I actually like some of the new country stuff. I like, oh, what's it? Morgan Wallen, I was listening to this morning, and Jason Aldean, and yeah, some of these guys. But
That surprises me.
yeah, well, believe it surprised me too. But yeah, no, I really do. I like some of their stuff. But I, I go back though regularly, and I sometimes I just got to get like a Cro-Mags. I have certain songs that I'll go back to over and over again, like "Raining Blood." I have to
Yeah.
hear that every so often. It just I'll be driving, I'll just stop the car and be like, I gotta hear that Slayer track. And there were some other ones that were less popular. I'm trying to think of one like Crush the Demoniac was a song. I always really loved that song by the Cro-Mags. It was on that, I think their second album. I don't remember what it was called now, but
Age of Quarrel? No, not
no,
Age
it
of
was the one after
Quarrel.
that. It was the
Yeah.
one after that. Actually, yeah, I think it might be the third album. But
Yeah.
yeah, no, it just has a great break at the end. Up here we go. Hang on.
That's cool. For you people that are listening, you'll have to go on YouTube and watch the interview to see the lights go out. It's pretty
But
good
it's
for a
very exciting.
metal.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, it's just a great metal atmosphere when it just
Extra
goes
production
dark,
value, right? If I had a little
dark.
strobe light over here, I'd press it for you. Yeah, there's
Before
another song. There's a song called "Potential for a Fall" by Sick of It All. It was a band from New
you
York,
like
and
those New York bands, huh?
yeah, yeah. Every so often I'll go and I'll play some of that because I just, you need that kind of adrenaline rush. But I mean, yeah, I listen to really just about everything. I mean, all different genres.
That's cool. Now, before you go, I have to ask you about, I know you've been involved with some films. Ted told me, and I saw the title. I think Lisa Boyle was in one of your films, and that caught my attention. Yeah. Two of
Yeah.
your films. So,
Yeah.
what was your role with these films?
I wrote the screenplays for the films and then I produced the films, which is to say, I sort of brought everything together required to get the films made, hiring a director, finding financing, distribution, and then organizing the production and the post production.
Wow, what are the names of these films? I mean, is it something that you can find out there now?
Yeah, oh, sure. I mean, they're around. One of them, the first one was too far back. That wouldn't be around. But there was one, the first one I did with Lisa Boyle was called Leaving Scars. And then the second one, we did a follow up to that a year later. Also, Lisa starred in both, called Pray for Power. And I'm guessing they're around. In fact, Pilsner has a song on Leaving Scars. They had
Pittsburgh
contributed to
band
the
with
sound.
Robbie Tabachka.
That's right. Yeah, they were right in there. Yep.
You talk to
Um,
Robbie at all anymore?
I haven't seen Robbie in a number of years. He used to work downtown in Pittsburgh, and at post-pandemic, I don't, to my knowledge, he's no longer working where he was downtown Pittsburgh.
He
So
was working in a parking garage. Yeah, I went to visit him in his parking garage. But before
that's
that,
exactly right,
Ides.
up on the
Yeah,
roof.
yeah. I
Yeah,
met I met Robbie when he was with Ides Records,
me
and
too.
then
Yeah.
Brave New World, his own record store. Yeah,
Yep.
we've been friends for a long time.
Yeah, that
So
was Robin Spar, I think, had that store.
yeah,
Spar
so
Smith.
I didn't mean to change the subject. Your films, can you find them on cable or anything?
I don't think you'd find them on cable anymore. You'd probably find them on DVD. I'm sure, in fact, I'm sure you could find them on DVD. I doubt they're still running anywhere on cable. I don't know, but I don't think so. It's too far back. Those films came out at around 99, 2000,
Oh
so
wow.
25
Wow.
years ago. Yeah. Yeah, that's what ultimately led to teaching was I had another film after Pray for Power. I had the script and I had Judd Nelson was going to play the villain and Antonio Sabato Jr. was going to play the hero and Brad Jakes, who I'd worked with, was going to direct and edit again. But the financing fell through. And I was struggling to sort of find a way to keep it going. And I literally, both my parents and my sister are English teachers. Everybody in my family is now an English teacher.
Wow.
Everyone. And I got into it for all the wrong reasons. I just, well, you know what, whatever. I can teach English, I think. I'll go and get certified,
Where'd
whatever.
you
I don't
go to
really.
school, Mark?
I went to Suffolk University.
Oh yeah, good school,
And,
real good
yeah,
school.
my dad taught there. So, yeah, I went there. And I just went because, it was like the cliche. I said, well, I'll have these big summer vacations. I can keep the movie stuff going if I'm able to. I can film, but I'll have a job and, it'd be sort of stable and blah, blah, blah. And the movie business is just like the music business. In my experience, you've got to be brilliant. There's the second place prize is a long way down, and it's just a grind if you're not at that top, Darren Aronofsky or obviously Steven Spielberg, somebody huge.
Yeah.
It's just a tough, tough business. And I did the two. It was very analogous to the to the music business. I did what ended up being 3 films. I was happy with all of them. I would never trade the experience for anything. It was fantastic, but it was done. It's one of those things where when you get closer to the top in each case, you can sort of see how the people at the top, how truly gifted in music, movies, whatever, how truly gifted they are. And I said, I'm not that good. It's just, and I said, and I'm more and more, I really started to like teaching. I enjoyed working with the students, and I was never an academic really, but I enjoyed working with the students, trying to help young people, move themselves forward. And the music, the movies, all of that had helped me, kind of shaped my experience. And so it was just a thing where I said, you know what, I've done what I could do with the movies. And I'm really liking the teaching thing, and that never changed. So here
Wow,
I am 30 years later.
it's great that you found your happy place, so to speak. That's
Thank you very
fantastic.
much. I appreciate that. Yeah, thank
I
you.
admire that you've done this for so long because I worked as uh, a substitute teacher, but I was in the school. I wasn't on a call. I was always there. 2 years in a high school, and I'll never go back to a high school again.
Yeah, that's a pretty common response, pretty common
Yeah,
reaction.
I mean, you got to have the right frame of mind to be a teacher. I know a lot of people in the music business that became teachers, and I'm like, wow, it's pretty impressive. Like just you and Nancy and Jamie, but I know other people in New York that I worked with at labels that became teachers, and I'm like, wow, how'd they do it? How'd you guys do it?
Yeah, I think there's a creative element that sometimes can carry over. There's an element of entertaining, and there's an element of being creative. And I think, yeah, it sometimes can sort of, not all the time. I mean, yeah, some people would never set foot in a classroom for $1 million, but yeah, some folks like myself, it wasn't. It lent itself. There was a connection there, I would say, and I suspect it's probably true with a lot of folks. Nancy and Jamie and other people I know.
You seem to have a good temperament, man, about the whole thing. Hey, thank you so much, man. I'm glad that Ted hooked us up because your story's really interesting. I mean, you've done a lot of cool things. And actually, even just because it didn't work out for me, whoops, as a teacher, for you, it seems like it did work out. And, I can see how you could enjoy being a teacher. And I can see it I can hear it in your voice. So,
I love it. Yeah, no, it's the best job. And I don't think I could. I sometimes joke to myself and to Dan, the drummer. I'll say, you'll see these videos. Metallica's on tour, and I mean, like last summer, they're doing these huge, incredible shows. And where I'm sort of like, well, yeah, that looks absolutely amazing, and I would love to do something like that for a couple of weeks. And then I say, and I mean, I'm kidding, of course. I mean, sure, who wouldn't want to, do? But at the same time, I'm like, yeah. At this time, you know what? I'm good. I love my students. And it's all good, and it's just funny. But yeah, no, and I think all of those things, the music and the movies, I hope made me a better teacher. So
hey, thanks a lot, Mark. I really appreciate your time, man.
thank you. I
All
really
right.
appreciate you having me here, and I mean that very much. I was really honored when you reached out to me. So
Oh, my
thank you
pleasure,
very
man.
much. I appreciate it, and just best of luck with everything.
Same, man. Same to you. Thank
Okay.
you.
Cheers. Yeah.